Well, let's speak to Hannah Weisfeld, Executive Director and founder of Yachad, a British Jewish organisation whose primary mission is to empower British Jews to support a political resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Well, a very good morning to you, Hannah. Thanks for joining us.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. What do you think this all means for the conflict going forward?
Well, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated his intentions, which are not new. He's always been very clear about the fact that he doesn't recognise Palestinian self-determination between the river and the sea. But I think in the aftermath of this terrible conflict, there are real questions for the international community to ask about what they do with Netanyahu as the leader of Israel, who is intent on entrenching a status quo that has brought untold suffering and bloodshed to both Israelis and Palestinians.
So you consider Benjamin Netanyahu to be the issue here?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that Hamas is also an issue in this conflict.
Of course.
We've seen with the atrocities they committed on October 7th. But Netanyahu, as the elected leader of the State of Israel, is really clear that he has no intention of doing anything that would bring either party closer to an agreement. And, that press... that little clip you played from Biden is a kind of desperate message. So he spoke to Netanyahu, I think yesterday, hadn't spoken, for 27 days. And because Biden's so furious with him, and it's kind of clutching at straws to say, well, I've spoken to him and there might be a way, it might be possible, I think we can get through this. You know, when Netanyahu's publicly broadcasting and saying, there will not be a Palestinian state on my watch, there will not be any elections anytime soon, and we will control the territory west of the Jordan River. It's really clear that he's not interested in making peace at all.
Have there been those in authority in Israel in the past that have been more open to a two-state solution?
Yeah, and I think even in the war cabinet today, you have different figures. So Benny Gantz, Gadi Eisenkot, you have people that understand that the reality on the ground is that the status quo, does not bring security for anyone. And, we've obviously had numerous attempts to make peace. I think often you get met with the response of, well, we evacuated Gaza and look what we've got. Gaza was a unilateral evacuation. And the two really good examples we have of peacemaking, which are Jordan and Egypt, have brought peace. It might not be a warm peace, but, 1973, when Israel was invaded by Egypt, and it was a 6-month incredibly intense war, nobody could have imagined that 6 years later you'd be signing a peace agreement with Egypt, and that peace has held for nearly 50 years.
Earlier during the week, I was listening to a journalist in Tel Aviv talk to us about a two-state solution actually not being a popular idea amongst Palestinians either, according to a fairly recent poll. Do you think that rings true?
Well, I think polling, you have to be quite sceptical about how you approach polling, because when you poll either population at a particular point, especially in the kind of middle of a conflict, and ask them the questions in a certain way, you do get incredibly negative responses now about a two-state solution, both amongst Israelis and Palestinians. But there is equally polling that shows that if a serious deal is on the table, the vast majority of both populations would accept it. But what you need to put that deal on the table is obviously the leadership. And the truth is that there is no leadership on either side at the moment that is capable of delivering that deal, which is why what the international community does, and what Biden does, obviously, in particular, in the aftermath of this terrible war, will be crucial, because the onus is going to be on parties outside the region to make that process happen.
And what should the international community be doing? Should they be joining the US in a push for a two-state solution?
Yes, I mean, there really is no other choice here. And so actually, the international community needs to find ways in which it can set the region on that path. And what we do have now, which is quite different from previous attempts, is the Abraham Accords, which I think, a lot of people, myself included, are quite sceptical of the fact that they wrote the Palestinians out of those accords effectively and sidelined them. But the fact that Israel now has working diplomatic relationships with a number of Arab states creates a different kind of political environment in the region in terms of bringing the parties together, because you have more players at the table. It's not just America. And so there are numerous policies that the international community could adopt that would help put the path in that region, regardless of who is currently in power. So action around settlements and settler violence. We've seen the US and the UK in the past month ban the entry of violent settlers from the West Bank to the UK and Israel. We could have more of that kind of policy, action around border security for Israel. There are lots of things the international community could do right now, which would make it very clear to the Israelis and the Palestinians that this is the direction we are heading in, and that there is no other option.
And just a word on how this impacts us here in the UK. I mean, we're hearing from one of Britain's top officers today saying it's hard to remember a more unstable and dangerous and uncertain world. Do these conversations at the moment about what potentially happens next post-war impact that?
Yeah, look, I'm not a security expert.
No,
and I don't know what the security threat is kind of to the UK. I can only imagine that it is heightened. I think that what is really clear is that there is real issues now around community cohesion in this country. And this war has really done an awful lot of damage to the social fabric of Britain. You know, so divisions between Muslim and Jewish communities, but not only Muslim and Jewish communities, issues on university campuses. There's a huge piece of work to do in working out how you bridge the divides that now exists here. And I have worked on this conflict for 10 years, and I, many years ago, studied at a very divided university in the middle of the Second Intifada. And I don't recall a time where it's been this difficult and the conversations have been so hard.
Well, thank you for talking to us this morning, Hannah. Thanks for joining us here on LBC News. Hannah Weisfeld, Executive Director and founder of Yachad.